Right, let's do a little bit of painting. It's a very hot day today in the UK, and which means things will dry faster, which is good. Which means things will dry faster, which is good. Which means things will dry. Um, just sorted out some of my audio issues. Hopefully this should be okay now. So the plan for today is to use watercolors to paint light. It's one of the most challenging things one can do, I think, in watercolor because the medium is just so unpredictable. So what I thought for today is I'd do a couple of small landscape paintings, focusing on dramatic skies. And I'm going to use just this basic watercolor pad. This is from Arch. This is rough grain, and it's very small, so it's 14.8 by 21 centimeters. So I think this is maybe A5. And then once I'm happy with it, I just want to experiment with a couple of things, and then the ones that do work, I'd like to try and make some larger paintings out of. So these are basically just studies. These are some of the previous studies I've done over the last few days. Yeah, I'm playing with colors, playing with um, glazes and different techniques. So don't really have any other plan other than that. And all of these are just going to be painted from imagination, thinking about different landscapes, I guess, that I'd like to try and produce. So the first one, what I thought I'd do is I want to do a kind of a rainy scene. So I was thinking about having a really dark, rainy atmosphere in this corner, and then maybe some some really shining light coming in here on the right hand side. Um, of my horizon line is going to be about 2/3 of the way down, and that just means that the subject of this painting is really going to be the sky. So let's get on with it. Let's see how it goes. I hope that you can see my palette. I I don't necessarily choose colors based on their names or anything like that. I just go by coolness, warmness, that kind of thing. That said, I think for this, I'd like to try this kind of dark, cool, cool blue. This is just a Payne's gray. And I'm painting wet and wet so that I can get this the effects that I'm looking for in terms of drama in the sky. And then for the glow, I might use, this is a warm yellow. I don't quite remember what it's called. So I'll just use it for this sort of soft glow here. And then I'll let the colors run into one another. I'm I'm not going to use a paper towel, I've decided for this one. I'm just going to use my brush to blotch out um, any paint, any excess paint or water that I may not want um, in my painting. Just adding some really um, organic strokes. The idea is that there is this sense of movement from top left down into the bottom right hand side. And then I'm tilting the paper to get the paint kind of moving in the direction of my rain. Just adding raw pigment into the sky to create a little bit more drama. I'm also aware that all of this is going to dry a lot lighter, so I'm not too worried about it looking very dark at the minute. And then settle in. So far this has only been Payne's Gray, nothing more. Oh, and this, obviously this little warm yellow. Okay, now to create contrast to the dark sky, I'm going to do a little bit, I'm going to set the scene for the ground. So I'm just adding some yellow ochre into the distance. And I think the two colors complement quite nicely. And then I'm just going to let that yellow ochre run into a bit of Payne's Gray here. Maybe some French ultramarine just to play around a bit with colors. Now, what I thought I would do is we have an area of dark here and an area of light here. So I thought I would do a kind of a crisscross pattern. So I have maybe dark light, or maybe dark light. Maybe I'll do dark light. Okay, now that these are, I'm using a relatively just squeezed out some water from my brush, and what I want to do is just introduce some areas of light, so maybe some clouds parting and making their way into letting the rays of sunshine in despite the drama. Might add a little bit of burnt umber. Essentially just getting warmer and warmer as I move towards the observer. Oh yes. There's a nice teal color here that would be interesting to use over here. So maybe some sort of lake or something. going to add some areas of French ultramarine just to darken it up. So something like this. And that's that's just the first layer done, I think. This layer sets out the major shapes, sets out the tone. And I tend to like, I like to draw the sky in the first layer as well. And once I put the sky down, I don't really go back into it again. In this layer, I also like to let the colors mix on the page. So I'll take some raw pigment and just drop it into the page and let it do its thing, because it just sets the tone. It doesn't really doesn't do much else. Great, so I think that's the first layer done. Preserved a little bit of white here, a couple of skip brush strokes on the water to indicate a little bit of that light scattering of the water, and I think that's okay for now. Just waiting for it to dry. It shouldn't be too long. I'm thinking that I might put a kind of a distant hill back here as well. Just to add a little bit of interest. I'll use some French ultramarine for that. And mix it with my Payne's Gray that's already sitting in there. And then I'll also use this hill to create a sense of the horizon. Now, actually, I normally don't really like cauliflowers, but this here is looking like a nice little accident. And I'm just going to make the most out of it. Let me drop some darker tones here. And then this, just because this looks a lot like foliage, so I've achieved a little bit of texture without um, planning to do that. What I might also do is just lose an edge or two, so maybe lose this edge a little bit. And maybe blend this here a little bit as well. Oops. Yeah. That's quite nice and unexpected. Let's just darken thing up a little bit as they approach the horizon line here. Now the reason I chose blue here as the color for my distant hills is because of this planar perspective. In planar perspective, you're essentially using color to create depth. So things that are further away, they tend to be cooler. So that's why I'm using blues. Things that are closer to us as the observer they tend to be warmer. So that's why I've used some burnt umber here. Still quite amazing how quickly this dries today. It is a very hot day. I think it's about 33 degrees. Yeah, so fairly hot. I don't know if that's in Fahrenheit. I think so. Times 2, which is 66 plus 32, 98 degrees. Yeah, so 98 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm just making the most of this cauliflower effect that I've found myself with. Yeah, just leaning into it really. Now I'm just going to be working on my middle ground. Ultramarine granulates really nicely, especially when it's mixed with things like sienna. So I'm going to use some French ultramarine to start working on my middle ground and create this almost like a glaze, which I'm hoping is going to granulate nicely as I paint. I'm already seeing some nice granulations emerge, which is good. And I'm not quite sure what this is, but I might leave it there because it's almost like a cast shadow from some invisible thing that's to the side of the painting. But then again, the light is a bit wrong. If this is the light, the shadow should be there, so I'm not sure. Or maybe this is the light source. This is just Yeah, maybe this is the light source actually, because that's the dark, that's the lightest light. I should have probably defined. Oh, hi. Can I ask something? I don't know if you can see, but how long are you using watercolors? I was trying 2 days ago, my first time in the literary field. Yeah. So I've been using watercolors for about 3 years, doing daily paintings. Watercolors are very, very difficult. I think materials do matter, and I think paper makes the most difference. So making sure that you're using 100% cotton paper, especially as a beginner, I think it makes a big difference. Paints, not so much. I think student grade paints and artist grade paints, um, there are obviously nuances there, but if you're just starting out, student grade paints are perfectly fine. But water behaves so much nicer on cotton paper than on cellulose paper. And then it depends on what sort of thing you're using. You can, if you're doing, if you're interested in texture, then getting something like a cold press 100% cotton paper is good. If you're interested in, florals and something that is a little bit smoother looking, then hot press paper is the way to go. But it takes patience, and I think, as with most um, things that have to do with paintings, you're gonna have a stage in your painting where it looks really ugly. Um, Usually that's sort of the first couple of washes, they look really, really ugly. And then when you start adding the darkest darks, that's when it begins to come together. Um, yeah, when I started out, I followed some tutorials, just kind of painting along with different artists, and that really helped me because there are a lot of techniques that one can just pick up through seeing how other people are using watercolor. The biggest challenge for me was just getting a sense of how water behaves. So the amount of water on paper is very important, and also the amount of water on the brush is extremely important. If um, if there's too much water in either one of those places, you won't get very good results with it. So it's just trial and error, I think. Just practice, practice. Draw as much as you can. Don't get discouraged if things don't look as nice as you would like them to look. Um, have faith in the process. And I always thought that, starting paintings is more important than finishing them. So if you start more paintings than you finish, that's perfectly reasonable. But yeah, watercolor, I think it's deceptive because it sort of positions itself as a easy medium, but it's easy in a sense that it's easy to clean it up and it's easy to transport it around. You don't need to move your, if you're painting with oils, you've got your solvents and your actual um, tubes of oil, and etc. Watercolor, this is all you really need is just a little palette and a brush and some water, and you're done. So it pitches itself as really great for beginners, but it's one of the most difficult mediums to control. You can't you can't paint over it. Once you've put some paint down, that's it. Um, and if you even things like gouache, I think gouache is a really nice, I think, beginner medium. It's a good compromise between things like oils and acrylics and watercolor because it's opaque, so you can paint right over it, and it's easy to transport, it's easy to clean up, very accessible, not very expensive. Um, so gouache is another, I think, a really nice medium to try. Now let's see. So what do I want? I think I'm quite keen to add um, some more textures into the foreground. So this is drying nicely already. And whilst the foreground is drying, I'll switch to a smaller brush, and I'm just going to pick up some areas of dark in the background. And to do that, I'm mixing some French ultramarine with burnt sienna, and that'll create a nice cool black. So just going to pick out some areas of dark that I think would look nice. And the main reason for it is to just solidify my horizon line so that our eyes are able to focus on something in the distance. So solidifying this horizon line, I think, is quite important. So these could be, you know, distant trees, hedges, something like that. Maybe rocks. Again, I'm not quite sure what this is a scene of, whether it's a lake, whether it's a seaside, you know, whether it's a beach. Could be anything, really. What I like to do when I'm painting distant things, that even if they're, you know, generally can be thought of as black, I try to still vary the color and let the paints kind of play together on the page. It makes things a little bit more interesting. Maybe do something like that. Let's add some French ultramarine to the foreground. And again, I want more granulations here. I think that would look really, really nice. Let's just add some more burnt sienna, French ultramarine. Hope that this will granulate nicely. With granulations, the page has to be quite wet, because to get the pigments to granulate, you really need some sort of channel for them to go through. And that's where you need a combination of heavy pigments and lots of water. And you let the gravity do the rest. So something like that here. Good. Enjoy the drawing. It's always good fun. Now, I think just to add some interest here, I thought maybe I'd add a couple of seagulls here. Floating about. I'll just reuse the paint that I already have in my palette, and just draw the wings. Maybe a little bit more paint. This is a really nice brush, actually. I enjoy using it. It's great for small details, but it's also really great for foliage. You get some nice random brush strokes with it. So let's get some birds flying. Key with these is to try and be a bit random with the wings. There we are. So that's a reasonable study. I might leave that for now, and think about the next one. So as you can see, I've hardly drawn any details. I've relied on the texture of the granule of kind of ultramarine and sienna granulations, and using more water or less water where I needed to create either little dry brush strokes or these kinds of cauliflower effects. So all of this is just random watercolor doing its thing, really. The only detail I've added, which I'm not sure if for better or for worse, are these birds here. I might add one here as well. There you go. He's trying to catch up with his buddies who seem to have left him behind. There we go. So that's good. There are a couple of nice things I like about this painting. I really like the shining light here, and I think this turquoise was a really nice find. It's a beautiful, beautiful color. So I'll let this dry, and I'll work on another painting. So I think for the next one I'll do something that I still quite like to do, a dramatic sky. But maybe something a little bit less watery. Maybe a field with some trees. Yeah, let's do a field with the trees, and maybe this time around I'll do it in portrait rather than in landscape. The main decision for that is whether you choose portrait or landscape is how you'd like the viewer's eye to move around your painting. If you like their eye to move from left to right, then landscape is the way to go. And usually there's a kind of a story unfolding in a linear fashion. So you might have, an area of dark here and then moving towards the light with some birds there. So you could interpret it as, from darkness to some hope and living creatures. If you're looking at landscape, at a portrait is read up and down. So vertical features, they obviously lend themselves nicer to the portrait mode. So I think what I'll do now is just go and swap my border, make sure it's clean, and I'll get back into it. So now some refreshments for me. a very, very hot Wednesday morning. Okay, so I'll start and just wetting the page, wet and wet. Again, my subject is going to be the sky, because I'm looking at what I want to do with these studies is just focus on the dramatic nature of light and play around with watercolor texture. So I'm giving most of my page to the sky. And I'm going to use a couple of things which I think would be fun. One is ivory black. So ivory black is a natural pigment which is very heavy. It granulates. So I'm hoping that it will produce some really nice granulation effects in my sky. So I'll start with the top. You can already see how it's granulating. I'm going to leave some areas of white because I am trying to, again, this is about chasing the light. So hoping that we're going to get some really nice effects of preserved light in our painting. I'm mixing this ivory black now with some French ultramarine to create almost like a dark indigo color, which I'm going to use to offset some of this light. Take it to the horizon line. And now, wow, look at these granulations. Gorgeous. I know some people don't like them, but I absolutely adore them. I love granulations. Let's just add some more pigment into the top corner. Get that contrast between black and dark and light. Let the colors play together. And let's get darker towards the horizon. Oh wow, that is absolutely beautiful. Look at these colors doing their thing. Yeah, that's nice. Complete accident. And I love this about watercolor, is that no plan whatsoever. I just let the gravity do its thing, going like this. Just tilting my paper so that I get some runs through. And that'll create an illusion that there is light just streaming down. Gorgeous. Wow. I really like this combination actually. I don't always use it. Ivory black with French ultramarine. This looks almost like a just really soft gray, but it's got those wonderful granulations in it. Lovely. It's very nice. So whilst that dries, I just need to have a think about my plan of attack for the ground. So I think the ground is going to obviously be here, and I'd like it to offset the darkness of the sky. So I'm going to use I think a warm yellow for now, with just a splatter of cool blue. That should create a fairly vivid green. I'm going to be careful, I think, around the horizon line. Might want to preserve some of those whites on the horizon because I think that could look quite cool. And then just let's add some burnt sienna into the foreground here. And then let the two colors meet and say hello to one another. I'm not too worried about these things that are coming up now. I'll make something out of them. The main thing is that I don't want the landscape to be too boring, so I think I'll just add some warmth there. This way we get a kind of a less linear gradation of yellow and sienna. I'm also thinking about adding some really distant mountains here, but using very, very dark pigment. I think it'll create a really nice contrast with these whites that I've left, and it will solidify the horizon line a little bit as well. I've got to be patient though, because this is where it can get quite wrong. I would like the distant mountains to be fuzzy, but if I add pigment too soon and my brush is too wet, I'm going to get cauliflowers. That just doesn't work with mountains. Cauliflowers are great with things like foliage in the foreground, but I need to be very careful about what I do and how I work with the background. Let's be bold. So I'm just going to use thick Payne's gray pigment and then see how that works. So that seems like we're not getting too much as a in terms of backgrounds. Looks okay. So something like this maybe. The key thing is to make sure that when you're adding pigment to already wet surface, if you want to avoid backgrounds, you need to make sure you're adding more pigment than water, because if you're adding more water, then this new water is going to push the existing pigment on the page out of its way, and you're going to get cauliflowers. That's why I think in many respects, working with tubes, watercolor tubes, is probably easier than working with pans. Um, what I've done is squeezed my tubes into my pans, and these are these are quite heavy duty colors. I think there's a lot of pigment in them, so I know that if I'm getting a dollop of Payne's Gray from here, has come from the tube, so I'm getting quite a lot of pigment in my brush. I can go forth and conquer. I don't know, I've added almost like a kind of like a tree thing here, mainly because this is a really light area, and to create contrast, it's good to add darks, your darkest darks next to your lightest lights. That looks all right, actually. So I didn't screw this up too much. Not yet, at least. So the next thing is for me to wait for this to dry and think a little bit more carefully about my foreground. I think for the time being, the foreground is a little bit boring. Part of me wishes I left a little bit of white here just to, if I thought I'd put a tree here or something like that, but catching the tree would need to be catching the light, otherwise it'll just blend into the background. Maybe I can do something a little bit. Let's just add something here. Take this up. There needs to be a focal point. I'm not quite sure what this clearly here is something of a focal point. So something needs to lead the viewer's eye from the foreground to the focal point. So I thought maybe a tree here would have been nice. If any of you guys have any thoughts about what I should put in the foreground, let me know. Because I'm a bit stuck for ideas. You know what I might do? What I might do is just add maybe some grass here, like some wheat. Maybe this is a wheat field. Maybe some wheat, and then kind of a road going up towards the focal point here, and then just some wooden posts to connect the sky and the ground. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. So let's be bold and add some wheat. Just put my brush on the side, and this is a little bit of umber. Just pushing it in. The road itself, I think, switch to a different brush and just get some dryish pigment. So I want to make sure it's probably too much. That's it. I want to dry brush it in. So something like that. Now we can add the nuances. Into there. And equally we can add some more nuance into the... Oh, I need to figure out what to do with these things here. Maybe they're little tornadoes or something. Yeah, let's just add some. Dark pigment. And maybe if it's sweet, we might want to just have some sense of growth. Let's vary the color a bit. This is what I mean. I really like this brush because I can get some nice details like this. So really, thin line. But then if I turn it on the side, I can get some really nice random marks like this, which is fabulous. Just make sure we've got some distant texture. Now we can draw some posts. Posts are fairly useful things because they can frame a composition, and also they connect elements of your landscape. So if I wanted to connect the sky to the ground, a post is a great thing. It creates this connection between the top half and the lower half. They're also fabulous for creating a sense of perspective because they act almost as anchors for your eye, and they lead your eye into the picture. So you could you could say what I've done here is this is obviously a bigger post than this because this is closer to me, this is further away, and then the eye just sort of travels from the lower right hand side up a little bit up to the left, and then out into the distance, and then up towards the sky. So there's a really nice kind of zigzaggy motion that's happening in the picture. I'm just accentuating that with some of this dark pigment that I have left. I'm just going to wait for this to dry because um, I'd like to um, I'd like to just add some specific details in the foreground here, so that the so that there's, I guess, a better sense of detailing as we come closer. I'm quite pleased how this little painting has turned out, because I didn't expect many of these things to happen. I didn't expect this lovely granulation when ivory black and ultramarine mixed together. Over here, really, really nice soft gray granules. Yeah. This is the earlier painting, which, now that it's fully dry, I'm not sure if I like it that much. It's okay. I think I just don't like this area here. This is a nicer painting. I think the glaze is just far gentler. Principles are the same. The sky is very similar. But I think the glaze in here is just a little bit more gentle. It fits the mood better. Yeah. So this should be drying quite nicely now, given that it's so hot. So I'll just add some final black details into the foreground. Good. I think I'll there with this painting. It's all right. It's still rather damp, the paper. There we are. Not sure if it's damp because of my work with it, or because it is actually quite damp. There's a lot of moisture in the air today. But this turned out well, I think. Again, I wasn't really painting the details, just letting watercolor do its thing. in the same way as I was doing with this painting. There's really no detailing. Everything is based on the qualities of the paints and gravity, I guess. Okay, I think I will do one more. Let's do third painting, and I will call it a day. So the question is, what should we paint as our third painting? I'd still like to do a landscape, I think. Let's do another landscape. Let's do a landscape. In landscape, I'll go and get some fresh water for my paints. And I'll leave these two for now, so you can see what I've been working on. Okay. Now let's do another landscape. Let's get some wet and wet going on. This time I'll just be a little bit, I guess, less precise with it. Now, I think it was William Turner where he liked to start with warm colors first. I think is quite sensible. So this is what I'm doing. I'm just dropping in some areas of warmth into my skies. So I've got warm, warm, cool. Be a little bit here mixing in with the cool. And now we're going to go for the drama. Let's get a really nice, deep ultramarine going. And I'm collecting all the paints that I've used in with the last two paintings. I don't really clean my palette between paints. Let's create a nice blue, blue, blue ultramarine. You can just let the colors play. Thinking about where the lightest light is going to be of my sky. Let's get some help with gravity. Just adding some alizarin crimson into my ultramarine to create a dark shadowy mixture. more. Let's just mop up some of this excess water. And I like to use my brush to do that rather than paper towel. Just makes things a little bit more organic, and I don't need to worry about having a paper towel to hand all the time. Just gonna tilt it so I can get the colors to run a bit more. There we go. So create some nice vertical streaks. Now for the ground. Start with a cool blue, sorry, cool green. So I'll get a cool yellow, and I'll get some phthalo green. Let's see what that looks like. It's okay. So that's just going to be a very basic color. Remember, this is just the first layer, so I'm going to be adding stuff to it, adding details, adding color, all that sort of stuff. For now, I'm just trying to turn the white of my page and cover it up. So just again, I'm not too worried about these things here. I'm going to be drawing or painting tree lines and stuff, so I'm not too worried about that. I do want to add a little bit of tone here, just there as well. All of this is going to dry a lot darker, so we don't need to worry about things looking particularly strange at the minute. And that's it. So the whole point of this first wash is to establish the sky, and then get some ideas down about what I'd like to do with the ground. And the same principle applies. So the planar perspective is as I start with cooler tones towards the horizon. As I move closer to the viewer, I am increasing the warmth of my pigments. So I start with a very cool green, go into a warm yellow, and then I go into the my siennas and my ochres. Just waiting for this to dry. I'm thinking I might just add some more interest on the horizon. So using a smaller brush, just add some kind of distant clouds. Not sure I expected this to be quite as wet. I thought it was going to be Well, less wet. So I don't know how this is going to turn out. Hopefully okay. If anything, I can always stick a mountain or something in the distance and hide my imperfections behind the mountain. Like that. Sort of broke my own rule this time around because I normally, once I finish painting the sky, that's it, I don't go back into it. So I kind of broke my own rule about it. And leave the paper tilted just a little bit to get some of to just to get the gravity moving the paint. So I think the foreground is dry. So the foreground is dry. We can see if we can do something with the middle ground. So I'm creating a dark mixture of sort of very dark green. The main purpose for it is I've added ultramarine into it, so hopeful that it's going to granulate. And that should create some nice natural textures that I can use. Just dropping in some raw ultramarine pigment to encourage this granulation. To the distance as well. And this is where it can go really, really wrong because if I have more water than pigment on my brush, it's going to create some unsightly cauliflowers. But if I have just the right amount of pigment, I'm going to get a really nice lost edge in the distance there. And that's actually looking like it worked. Excellent. to overlap these two. And I think this creates a really nice atmospheric effect where you've got really fuzzy edges in the background, some more defined edges in the foreground. And the main, I think, technique here is just judging the wetness of your paper. So I realized that my foreground is relatively dry. That means I'm going to get a hard edge, but my background was still drying. So I can take the same colors and just drop them in. And because the background is wetter than the foreground, I get a nice variation in my edges. Let's add some, oops, some more black. Let's add some foreground elements. One of my favorite artists is Edward Wesson, and I think this is where I've kind of picked up. And the idea is that all I'm doing is just indicating things. I'm not really drawing them out. I'm just indicating their presence. And then it's the human eye that draws them out. So the interest here is that this could be anything. These could be, you know, farm fields. They could be hills, foliage, whatever is the story, whatever the story you'd like the painting to tell. These could all be that. And the beautiful thing is that it's the human eye that, or the human brain that turns these marks into stories. At the end of the day, painting is just putting the right color in the right place. And the rest is left to the imagination. Interestingly, I don't usually use ultramarine for skies. I find it a little bit too rough, but I think it works well in this case, because the aim of this exercise, of this study, was to create some drama and some light. I'm just waiting for this to dry, because the final thing I want to do is just put a nice glaze over this. And to do that, I'm going to get a flat brush. Oh, actually, no. I'll go get some clean water, and I'll use my mop. That's all. This is drying. For a glaze, it's very important that the paper is as dry as a bone. So whilst it's drying, I'm just going to create a a mixture of French ultramarine with some alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is a transparent pigment, so it can easily go on top of other structures on my page. I'm just creating a nice kind of warm neutral. Transparent, warm, neutral. And this is where we're going to use this glaze as a means to carve out light. So what I'm thinking is, again, using kind of zigzag motion, using the light to lead the viewer's eye into the focal point, into the distance here. And that means I'm going to carve out an area of light that follows this path, and everything else is going to be in shadow. Yeah. Just waiting for it to truly dry. Don't want to be too impatient with it. Actually, the distant bits are already probably dry, so I can carve around this area here. All right, let's go. There we are. Let's just indicate that this is maybe a hill or something. It's a little bit of a shadow there. There we go. I think that's a reasonable study. So we've made 3 paintings, 3 little studies of our landscape, with the primary intention of preserving the light and using the light to lead the eye around the painting and towards some sort of story. There we are. So as you can see, the main focus of all of these has been the sky. It's taking up at least 75% of every painting. But using the sky to preserve light and then to define how the light is going to fall in our landscape. What I've tried to do in this is think about alternating areas. Dark, white, dark, dark, white, dark. And then this is the last painting where we're using light to kind of lead the viewer's eye into the distance. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great fun painting these, and I hope to see you soon on the next one. Take care.